Hi, Sally Foley-Lewis here, and I'm so excited to have a conversation with Dr. Karina Butera about this whole idea of self-leadership, and really excited to hear from a master coach around her thoughts on what self-leadership is. So Karina, welcome to the Spark series. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Sally. I'm really excited about being here.
Yeah, so as you know, I'm diving into this whole arena of self-leadership and wanting to hear from senior leaders such as yourself around what does self-leadership mean to you, and really diving into that rabbit hole. So let's kick it off and tell me, what does self-leadership mean to you?
Yeah, when you posed this question to me, I kind of pondered a bit. And I think, to me, the definition of someone who is self-led is someone who knows their core purpose, knows their core values, and lives their life by them, and lets those things lead them by being driven, committed, disciplined towards meeting their core purpose.
Yeah, I like that.
And so it's going to be different for everybody. I don't think there's a formula. I think, let's say, for example, your purpose is to make $1 million. Well, then you're going to be driven to get up in the morning and check the stock exchange and, maybe be really ruthless. But if your purpose is to bring kindness to the world, then that's going to look really different on how you act and how you live out that.
Yeah, it's so values led, which goes into behavior, which goes into that cycle background to who you are and how you want to lead yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And so what do you think the impact self-leadership has on someone's confidence or their influence or their courage?
I think you have to have a level of self-confidence to be self-led. And I think the more wins you have on the board, the easier that is. So I think it's probably a lot harder when you're first entering the workforce. Although, conversely, I think when you're young, you're courageous anyway. You're plucky. I see young people, particularly young people now, they're not afraid to speak out. And I know when I was younger, I was bolshy. I'm a lot more politically correct and, keep my mouth shut, although my colleagues might disagree with that. I remember, as an example, when my very first job when I was 17, there was our boss that we all reported to, and it was in a bank. So it was all women, like 95% women, and then the men in the offices. And one of the men in the offices was particularly touchy-feely with the girls. And this is going back to, the early 1980s, where that was kind of the norm, but there was this kind of, birthing of feminism. And I didn't even consider myself a feminist back then, but it used to really rattle me when, he'd come up behind me and had his arm across me, and I'd see him slapping other girls' bums and things like that. And he was really inappropriate. And we had a telephone once, and it was a late thing, there were drinks, and we were counting for the telephone and pizzas and all that. So it was very social, and we were all working late. And so he was a little bit more out of line than usual and was being very personal with one of the girls in particular. And I learned a very valuable lesson that day, because he was a topic of conversation for all the women in the tea room in the mornings and the afternoons. Like, oh God, who's being touched by him today? And everyone hated it. So I got onto my power stance and said, excuse me, Mr. Blah-de-blah, do you realise that what you're doing is really inappropriate and you shouldn't be doing that? And I said that in front of all of the staff, and there was just dead silence. And I looked to my comrades and said, isn't that right, ladies? We don't like it. Well.
Because you were left alone right then.
Can you imagine? Yeah, everyone going, yeah, Karina, yeah. No one did. Everyone looked at the ground, turned around, mumbled, walked away. And I was left standing there going, what just happened? Yeah. I thought everybody hated this. And I learned a valuable career lesson there. It wasn't long that before I started getting very seriously performance managed by him. But I think When you're young, I think you're a lot more idealistic and a bit more vocal. As you get older, and this might not be a great thing, but I think you learn to play the politics a little bit more. And but going back to the confidence thing, I think confidence builds over time, and appropriate confidence builds over time.
It's interesting that the story you just shared, and thank you for sharing it. But I wouldn't it be nice that that same courage, comes with you over your years? And I'm not saying it hasn't, but you can certainly see in some situations for some leaders where maybe in the early 20s, they're guns blazing, no filter, full on, it goes from here to here before they've even thought about it and got themselves into a career limiting move. And I just would love that same amount of courage came through everyone's career. And I've seen people who actually they learn a little bit more diplomacy, a bit more maturity, a bit more experience, tells you when to pick your battles. But it's almost like some battles just don't get picked anymore. And they're some of the battles that really should still be picked. So yeah, it's interesting. How long did you stay at the bank after that?
I think it was only a couple more months, but yeah, I actually was planning. That was, that was back in New Zealand, and I was saving to come to Australia at that time anyway. So it was only ever going to be a short-term thing until I saved enough money to jump the ditch.
So did you actually affect change in him?
That's a good question. I think he was a bit more subdued. Yes, I think that he did walk around a bit more with his hands behind his back. So maybe he realised, maybe he, I don't know, even got some coaching, or maybe the bank manager, because he was the accountant, so he's 2IC. Maybe that got back to him, and maybe there was a little word. He certainly changed his attitude towards me, but that was okay.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's okay for people not to like us.
Yeah. Well, I certainly realised after that, okay, I'm not going to be flavour of the month for him anymore. So I just live with that.
Yeah. So I guess it's your thoughts on the impact self-leadership has on the value of your work is really important then, isn't it? So if you look at that example, even though no one in the break room sort of stood up for you and high-fived you, and everyone was more than willing for you to be the solo volunteer to take it for the team, what impact do you think it had for the rest of the team, for the other women especially?
Well, it was interesting because I did, and I don't know how this relates in, but I did get taken into the fold more. Things that the historical background a little bit and secrets that others knew got told to me, so I could understand the situation a bit more. Turned out that the woman he was particularly cozy with, he was having an affair with. So, just the 80s,
Okay. All right, let's move on to that one then.
But I think the lesson that I got out of it, and it comes back to self-leadership, is that I chose my battles from that point forward. And I learned from that very early age, do not take it for the team without first consulting and without having a plan of action. And it comes back to self-leadership. If it's important to you, do it, speak out, do it, but do it from your voice. Do not speak for other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for a whole bunch of reasons. Because I've had other people in the past who've done that to me and said, this is what's going on and this is what we think. Isn't that right, Karina? And Karina said this. And suddenly it's like, hang on, whoa. I don't want to be brought into this because that could be taken out of context. So I think self-leadership is, you have to be prepared, I think, to stand in your own space and your own value set.
Yeah, and your own power. Yeah,
Correct.
Definitely. And that's responsibility, isn't it? This is my issue. I'm owning this issue, and maybe I need help from others with this, but can only speak about this for me right now. If others are the door is open and I invite others if it's relevant. But yeah, right now it's for me, from me to you. So
yeah, and I like what you said then about I might need help with this. I think I like the fact that you're owning that your experience may not be the experience of other people, and I've had times where I've been prepared to walk away from jobs because I've had an issue about a particular thing going on within the culture, or it might have been, something that was happening that everyone else was okay with. And when I went to my manager about it and, explained, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm feeling, and I've reflected on it a lot, and I can't see the culture changing to be the sort of culture that I'm going to fit in with. So I'm the odd person out. So the best thing for this is for me to leave and find a culture that's going to fit my personality and my value set better. So in that space, you're honouring yourself, and you're not going around expecting the world to change around you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm with you on that. I think there's giving up too early. There's always, you've really got to test the waters and see, is this me or is this something else? But if it's definitely you're the odd one out, and you can see that there's, from every effort from out of your toolkit, you've done everything you can to fit, then part of your self-leadership is absolutely honouring who you are and how you want to be seen to be leading yourself, as well as how you do lead yourself. So yeah, if it's time to go, it's time to go. I think that's the healthiest way in a lot of ways. So yeah.
I think it's an interesting thing too, and it's one thing I've noticed over the years is your strongest position you're going to come into as a negotiator is having no emotional vested interest in whatever it is that you're going for, whether it's a job or whether it's what have you. If you're going for it and you're thinking to yourself, okay, this could be the right job for me, but maybe it's not. For it to be the right job for me, it would have to have this happening for me.
Yeah.
So you go in there and you say, I'm not saying that this is what the job warrants, but this is what it would have to have in it for me to be wanting to apply for it and be, in that job. So
yeah, and I think that's a good example where you've got people who are absolutely stuck in a job that they're so misaligned with, and they're burning out. They're starting to become unhealthy, physically, emotionally, and intellectually unhealthy in all different ways. And you can see them running to job ads as an escape, which is just going from the pan to the fire, as far as I'm concerned, and not actually taking the time to say that my next move has to be in alignment with my values. Just like you were saying, my next move has to bring me joy. I have to bring it my joy as well. It's not one way. My next job has to have in action these values, not just the plaque on the wall and those ugly posters on the wall, but the actual values in action that are aligned with who I am. So yeah, thank you for that. I think that's you raise a really good point about that. I just wonder, we're talking about some of the negative things. So maybe there's been an event, and maybe it was COVID-19 that through you or someone and it sort of, what I'm getting at is I'm really curious about how do we reignite the spark when we've lost it? When we feel as though we've lost our self-leadership or we've lost our way a little bit, how do we reignite it? And I'd love to know how and what are the lessons you've learned, if it's you or someone or, an example you've got.
Yeah, well, I certainly have plenty in my own life, but an example that comes to mind is there was a client that I worked with a long time ago, and I see this happening a lot out there. What my experience is oftentimes, especially in large organisations, there might be a team that's seen as dysfunctional or part of the culture that is seen as lazy, weary, whatever. And so they'll bring in a really strong change agent and basically give them the task. The organisation's lagging, there's no enthusiasm, the culture's dead, resurrected. And this particular client of mine, he was known as that sort of person, and came in, very charismatic man, into a very dead organisation, very lifeless organisation. And he came in and, basically said, well, questioned everything. Why did we do this way? Well, that's how we've always done it. The classic usual. Well, what if we do it this way? What if rather than everyone having whips, why don't every staff member have a negotiation with their boss about how they want to track their work? Like, everyone's different. Well, hang on, that means throwing out our processes that we were working with fine for all these years. And eventually the teams themselves were coming alive, but then that threatened the hierarchy and the bosses weren't happy with it. And so he started getting pressure from the very people who brought him in to enliven the organisation. And it got to the point where he was being performance managed so strongly that he brought me in as a support person for a meeting with the CEO and two of the VPs of this organisation. And I remember when I first started working with this man, he was energized, enthusiastic, and I was watching him in this discussion with these senior people in the organisation that he was actually part of that level. He was at the same level with two of these people and reported to the third. And his posture, he was like down and he was like this. He looked like he was taking a beat. He looked like a beaten man. And I know that his behaviours at that time were getting worse and worse. His health was getting bad. He was starting to have high blood pressure and it was impacting on everything. And in a coaching session with him, we got back to what were you brought in here to do? What have you done? What's gone wrong? Is there something about the original brief that you haven't done right? And then we were able to recognise that he was ready for that gig, but that workplace wasn't, and that executive team wasn't ready for that change.
So what did you do with him to help him get himself back on track as well?
Really basic stuff.
Yeah.
So some of the basic stuff was just all about getting his mindset right, getting his body right, just coaching him on basics. Like, when you're like this, when you're like, he was literally slumped across the desk. Hey, your whole body is in defeat mode. If you're going to be going into these meetings, just basic body language, shoulders back and chest out, and look people in the eye. And that, I think, is part of self-leadership. It's just, no matter how much you're beaten, you don't have to look beaten.
Yeah. And I one of the models that I'm playing with around this is looking at value, voice, and visibility as three core areas. And I think, when we're in such high stress and prolonged uncertainty, things like our self-talk, our self-image, our self-belief can take some knocks. And I think that if we're not paying attention to the voices in our head, and are they helping or are they hindering? Does the imposter syndrome get louder when everything else around us is telling us we're not doing something right, or we get so much pushback? I wonder if also in that environment, some of his own boundaries were challenged a bit, because what do I have to do to get through to you people is what I'm hearing this guy say. That's my imagination is going with this poor guy. So what are your thoughts around those sorts of elements?
Well, the funny thing about it is, whenever, you know the, I guess, the triangle of the transactional analysis model, where, if somebody's under threat, they're likely to go into child mode or adult mode. And the child mode has been quite rebellious and a bit like, just, I'm going to do it anyway. I'll say I'm not going to, and I'll do it anyway, And it was so funny with that particular person. I saw him go into, and I had to pull him up on that and go, you're doing this stuff, you're being antagonistic, you're deliberately getting them offside, you're having fun. You're going out and doing exactly what they don't want you to do just to see the reaction. You know, you've gone into child mode. And the great thing about this particular client is he was a real life learner, and he loved it. Like, he used to just really love the coaching sessions and like, oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's bad. I shouldn't do that, should I? You know, and getting him to get back into adult mode. You know, if you want to be serious, you've got to come to this game as an adult and play as an adult.
Well, to me, that's brilliant self-leadership in itself too, is that being a lifelong learner and being open to be called on behaviours and owning it. And I love that. I love it when, you know, you're talking to people and they kind of go, yeah, probably shouldn't do that. And that moment of realisation, I think, is just gold, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the other thing I've seen working with executives is, and especially it seems the higher the level of executiveness they get to, the more they are willing to put up with crap behaviours from the organisation or from above them. For example, there was one marketing director I was talking to once, was coaching once, and she was talking about how the culture was presentism culture. You know, it was like you didn't want to be the last one in, and you didn't want to be the first one to leave, and, you know, all of that stuff. And that the boss was quite aggressive, and she was, you know, talking, give me some examples of the aggression of this boss. And, you know, she'd say things like, he'd walk in and yell across the office at you and say, did you get the targets that you were supposed to get? How's that dumbass team of yours going? And things like that, quite abusive. And she was talking to me about, there was one time, it was the end of the year, they had their Christmas breakup, and the whole team was there, and he was flipping around all the staff and being really charismatic and really cool and really hip, and everyone was loving him. But what those people didn't know is that the executive team that morning had a meeting with him where he'd sat them around the board table, and he had basically said, our year's results were crap. He didn't use that word. He used a worse word than that. Lots of F-bombs. You need to explain to me why you should have a job, why you should have an effing job next year.
Wow.
And went around the whole table. Every single person had to justify why they had a seat at that table and why you shouldn't fire them on the spot. This was in a boardroom. And I was listening to her, and I said, you know that that's abuse, right? That's humiliation, it's abuse. And so for her, what I had to do is help her realise that, would she put up with that sort of abuse in any other kind of relationship? And I used her husband as an example. If your husband was talking to you like that, tell me one good reason why I should continue to be married to you. Tell me one good thing you've done. What value do you bring to this household? Would you tolerate that?
Yeah.
Or would you stand up for yourself? And when I put it in those terms, and we realised that she was giving, because of the fact that she was trading off the paycheck for the permission to abuse.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, when you look at that, the amount of income that we have, and of course we've got to eat, we've got to pay the bills, and it is such a difficult situation that you can get into. I know I've had a similar situation coaching someone and saying, you need to go home and do the maths. Actually do the maths. Don't stop playing this tape in your head that is about all these scenarios, and you're doomsdaying it and you're catastrophizing. I need you to go home, have an alcohol-free night with your wife, and do the maths, and come back and tell me whether you can actually go down a rung in the ladder and go back to being in your joy and in the best position you love being in. You know, the money has to be accounted for, and it has to be discussed, because I think it can really trap people. And it's one of those things that absolutely seems to give that permission for all this other bad behavior. It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, we could talk about this for days, but we don't have that. So how do you, go back to your gentleman who was being a bit childlike, you know, how did you fire up his self-leadership? How did you reignite that motivation for him?
Oh, look, I think helping him identify some patterns in. We all have our triggers and we all have our patterns, and we might be absolutely able to stand our ground in certain circumstances with certain people, but whether it's the tone of voice, whether it's the fact that they're a man or a woman or have a degree in something, there's some people who've got they feel intimidated because somebody's got a high level of education, for example, even though they've got 40 years of experience. If they get dealing with somebody who's got a master's or, whatever, they all of a sudden go to water. So I think part of it was helping him helping him understand why it was he was feeling so powerless in that situation, and particularly with his boss. And, then working out and also looking at the personalities and understanding the whole, I use DISC as my model for personality and behaviours, but there's so many out there. But helping identify what's your personality and what's hers, and they were like that, So the threat, helping him realise that the threat was going both ways, and helping him gain a sense of empathy for his boss, because he would have terrified her.
Yeah.
And so the more he terrified her with his behaviour that she saw as like crazy, outlandish, then the more she was putting restrictions on him and making him do more reporting and making him do more checking in, which went totally against his natural behaviour. And
it triggers you can see the spiral, can't you, and the back and forth, and you can see how without putting a pattern or a pattern break in there to say, hang on a minute, you can see both of them spiraling down and losing their sense of power and confidence, and even losing their ability to influence, or influence in a positive way. So that's nice.
Yeah, no, but I think that the other thing about it is, it comes back to what you were talking about before, where, if you realise that something's not working for you and you're not happy at work, you can't run away. You do need to confront it. You need to have the guts to go into whoever it is you need to talk to, the boss or whoever, and have the conversation about this is really difficult for me. Is it difficult for you? Is it difficult for other people? Because I'm finding this really difficult. And asking for the help. And I think that's something that, I know myself, in my past, I'm not good at asking for help. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, because we think if we ask for help, it means that we've failed. We haven't done it right enough yet, So I think you do need to have the confidence to go, I'm not perfect. And I never will be. And maybe it's not that I'm doing it well enough. Maybe I haven't been given enough support. Maybe I haven't been given enough resources. Maybe I haven't given enough training, maybe I'm just being overloaded. Coming and asking for help and saying, hey, I'm drowning, is not a sign of weakness.
And it's also, I think, one of the things around that is it's not I'm drowning and I'm permanently drowning. It's right now I need a little bit of reprieve. And I think there can be this potential for people to feel like that's a permanent thing, when in actual fact, no, it's just a dip, and I'm going to come back up, and I'm going to come back up better if I get the right help. I just need help to find the right help, and then implement it, and then we're back on track again. I just wish that was sort of something that was also part of that discussion, is just a short-term blip to help me write the course again. So definitely asking for help, I think, is a big one, isn't it? So thank you for that.
Recognizing that you can, just to be, there's very few people who get up at 5 every morning. I know there's people who say they do. I get up at 4:30, I do my yoga, I go for my 6K run, and then I come home and I do my washing, and I do, I start work at 7:30 in the morning, and
and I have my fermented mung bean tea.
Yeah, exactly. I dare you to do that for a whole 2 years. Come and report in, keep your records. But no, I think that we have to recognise that we're human, and we need to allow ourselves downtime, and we need to allow ourselves time where I'm not having a good day. So on a day that I'm not having a good day, I'm actually going to be my own best leader, and I'm going to say to myself, you know what? you're going to be as useless as cow poo today. So why don't you put aside that massive piece of work that you're working on, put that to one side, and go and do something really mundane, like do some filing or
self-care,
tick some boxes, do something, or give yourself a day off.
Yes. Yeah.
Clean the house or something.
And I just want to jump in there and just say, all due respect to those who do get up at 4:30 and do their 6K run and do their yoga, we are obviously abundantly jealous of you. And we admire you. However, for those of you who do have fermented mung bean tea, we have to have a serious conversation. With your essence about what you're talking about there, Karina, I totally agree around, you can't be 100% on all the time, and you need that self-care. And that's also part of, self-leadership is about leading oneself. And so if I need care, go get it and do that and give that. And it's not a gift. It's actually it's an essential. I think COVID, you saw COVID fall out and you say, okay, who's an essential worker and who's not an essential worker? Self-care is essential. It's not a gift. And I think that's a really important thing. Look, we are absolutely running out of time, but I would love to talk with you about this for another 14 hours. So one last question, if that's all right, Dr. Karina. What is one thing you wish you knew about self-leadership when you first stepped into a leadership role?
Look, I think one thing that I don't know whether it's about stepping into a self-leadership role, but I wish that I had have known when I was a kid and when I was a teenager that I was bright. And I think sometimes we're lucky. Some people are very lucky and they're raised in households where their talents, their strengths are affirmed. So I would say that for those people who didn't have that, and nothing wrong with my parenting, my parents, they were wonderful people, but it was a working class household, and the values were around being a good person. So school reports would come in. It was about, were you well behaved, not what were your scores. And so I actually went all the way through school thinking I was an underachiever. In high school, we got put into extreme classes, and it wasn't until I got my PhD years later, in the year I turned 40, and I was talking to my best friend who was in the same class with me in primary school and high school, and I said to her, who would have ever thought that dumbass me from back in third form would ever get a PhD? She said, Karina, you idiot. You weren't dumb. We were in the top class. What are you talking about? We're in the top class. Well, we were 3A for a reason. It went from A to F. We were the smart kids.
I'm like how your friend says you idiot to you, though.
yeah. But she didn't realise I didn't know.
Yeah.
All the other kids in the class knew that A meant we are the high achievers. I was the dumbest kid in the smartest class. So I took on self-belief.
But were you? You just didn't know that that's what that was, the labeling and the setting up. You see, if you didn't realize, then you're obviously amongst your peers. You performed as equitably with the rest of your peers. It was just how they divvied up the kids in that year.
Yeah, no, but what I meant to say is that your self-identity is really important, and I think owning what you're lucky enough to be born with.
Yeah. You got to be able to identify it and own it. Yeah, definitely.
And so own it. Okay, I was lucky enough to be born with a fairly bright mind. And so just go out there and do the best I can with it.
Yeah, nice. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't think we can beat that. Thank you. So Dr. Karina Butera from the Boundless Impact Proprietary Limited, Master Coach. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on self-leadership in the Spark series. Thank you.
You're most welcome. It's great.